January 15th, 2019, City Planning Commission meeting. We will begin the meeting with a roll call.
Good evening, Commissioners. Commissioner Ackerman. Commissioner Briggs.
Here.
Commissioner Gibb-Randall.
Here.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Milstein.
Here.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Here.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Here.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Here.
Commissioner Woods.
Here.
And I'm guessing we are close to a full house.
Excellent. Introductions. Do we have any introductions this evening?
Nope.
All right. Approval agenda. Do you have a commissioner that will move the agenda? Moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Briggs. Any comments, changes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They are approved. Moving on to reports from City Administration, City Council, Planning Manager, Planning Commission officers, committees. Sorry, moving backwards to minutes of previous meeting. If it's okay, we'll take the minutes from the August 21st and October 16th meeting together. Do I have a commissioner that will move? Moved by Commissioner Weatherby, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. Any comments, changes? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Those are approved. Now moving on to reports from City Administration, City Council, Planning Manager, and Planning Commission officers and committees. We'll begin with City Council. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you'll bear with me, I lost track of time. Ran to the restroom. We have had one City Council meeting since we last met, and in that time, items of interest to this body that we discussed. With respect to water and sewer rates, that'll allow us to move forward on some long-term planning. Water and sewer rates were separated, sewer passed, and we will see increases to the sewer rates, which will allow us to maintain our bond rating and secure interest rates that will allow us to pay off for the construction of our wastewater treatment plant that was completed a few years ago at an interest rate that will be much more advantageous to the ratepayer moving forward. On the water rate side, the move to raise water rates failed, although it looks to be coming back sometime between now and July after the proportion of what customer classes pay what share of our total water spending is reviewed and perhaps voted on. So more to come on that. Of course, anything that involves our infrastructure and capital spending is of interest to this body, and so we'll be discussing more of those projects and impacts when we delay revenue tonight, I'm sure. We reformed some of or took a first step to reform some of our medical marijuana licensing. This revolves around the permitting side of it, so not necessarily the zoning itself, but the operations of how one secures a local permit or license to operate within the city of Ann Arbor. There were, other than that, small annexation, and I think that covers it.
Thank you. Mr. Lerner, do you have a report for us this evening?
I do. Starting to, as the new year finds me reflective, I've found a little, been doing some mining of data that I thought might be of interest to the Planning Commission based on some of your work over 2018. Over the course of 2018, the city, through both Planning Commission and City Council, approved 117,636 new square feet of non-residential floor area. So that's square footage of offices, commercial, hotel spaces. We approved, any guess on the number of residential units?
3,000.
304 residential units were approved in the city in 2018.
Feels like way more.
As a planning commission, you in total reviewed 77 planning petitions over the course of 2018. 14 of, in addition to that, 14 petitions were administratively reviewed by staff, And then of those 77, 27 petitions moved on to City Council for action. A couple of significant milestones for 2018 was, of course, I think through this body's hard work in the City Council's adoption of the new Unified Development Code. And while we still have many petitions and new opportunities to look at our ordinance as it relates to changing legislation, also 25 medical marijuana provisioning centers and a couple of other types of facilities were adopted in 2018. So I hope you find some sort of level of production and pride and a significant amount of work accomplished in addition to the late nights. That's all I got.
Wow. Thank you. Go team. Planning Commission officers and committees. We have quite a bit of written communications that were in our packet. We now move on to audience participation. This is a time for the audience to address the Planning Commission in regards to any item as long as it is not on our agenda for this evening. So if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission about an item that is not on our agenda during our upcoming public hearings, you may do so. You'll have up to 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission. Seeing no one, I will move on to a public hearing scheduled for our next business meeting.
Let me do it from memory. The items for the next meeting will be 2 rezoning petitions that were initiated by City Council. One is the rezoning of several lots in the area of West Hoover, Main, South Main, Edgewood, and Wilder Place. Also part of that resolution was the proposed rezoning of 7 parcels on the 600 block of South Ashley. These are properties that are sort of bookended by Armin Cleaners and the Washtenaw Dairy. And then we will also have a proposed site plan for City Council approval, Bristol Ridge site plan. This is a proposal at 2710 to 2750 Pontiac Trail. It's a 7-acre site that is proposing a 69 townhome development.
Thank you. We will now move on to unfinished business. So our procedures for this evening for the remaining petitions that we'll be hearing, the petitioner will have up to 10 minutes to address the Planning Commission. We will then move on to a staff report. After the staff report, we'll open up to public hearing. Those in the audience who wish to address the Planning Commission during that time, that will be your time to do so. And then we will move on to the motion and discussion. So our first item is 1251 North Main Street Special Exemption Use for City Planning Commission approval. Do we have the petitioner here to present? If you can please step up to the podium, you'll have up to 10 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Hello. Thank you, everybody, for your time. My name is Omar Hishma from Exclusive Brands, a vertically integrated medical marijuana company here in Ann Arbor. And we're here tonight to discuss requesting an approval for an existing location at 1251 North Main Street for a medical marijuana provisioning center. These renderings are actually of the exterior of the building and the interior retail space and office space. If anybody had any questions, I'm sure.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We will now move on to a public hearing, and then we'll have discussion, which we may have questions for you at that time. First, we'll have a staff report from Mr. Kowalski.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll cover a little bit. Petitioner just said basically the subject site, 1251 North Main Street. The site is currently zone C3, which is the fringe commercial zoning district. You can see it on the left on your screen is the aerial shot of it. It's completely surrounded by a PL, or public park land. That is the Bluffs Park. It's directly or across the street from the entrance, Lakeshore Drive entrance that runs along to the Argo Pond area. Again, so here's a photo of the existing site. Of note, you can see the rather extensive curb cut. So the petitioner here, again, requesting permission for a medical marijuana provisioning center. This is a project that you all have seen before. I believe the last time was in July. At that time, staff was recommending denial due to issues with the traffic that weren't addressed at that time. And Planning Commission at that date did postpone the petition. The petitioner did work extensively with their traffic engineer, worked with our traffic engineer, back and forth to come up with a solution that was approvable from both our traffic engineer as well as something that would work for the petitioner. This is a MDOT right-of-way, which does mean that any petition here would be, whether it's approved tonight or, well, if it was approved tonight, it would need ultimately to go forward, it would need permission from the Michigan Department of Transportation. So we would ask that that would be conditioned upon, if it was to be approved tonight, it would be conditioned upon that approval. Our traffic engineer has looked over the plan. She does feel that it does comply with the MDOT standards, because I did ask that before the meeting as well. You know, does this look like something they would remotely approve, or are we just, you know, doing this for nothing? But she did say that it does meet their standards. Now, obviously, we'll need the final say back from the Michigan Department of Transportation. There are 11 parking spaces that are on the site. You can see them here on the site plan. They are kind of running directly adjacent to the building, and then there's two kind of across, just north across that. There's a barrier-free space located up towards the front of the building. Currently, and when we go back to see the picture, you can see it's pretty much all impervious surface. They're proposing to remove, I forget the enough, it's 2,134 square feet of impervious surface, which would be basically this area right here. And then there's kind of a traffic island here. So as you can see, it would be just only a right turn in, a right turn out at that location. And then with this impervious surface removed, this would be grassed in this area here. Bicycle parking would be covered and located directly adjacent to the door. So we'll skip through the floor plan, which you can see in front of you here. That would be the 2,000, a little less than 2,000 square feet of retail space at the location. And so again, this is similar to what you have out there, but this would be the exterior elevation of the location. So at this time, with the conditions put forth in your staff report, staff is recommending approval, conditioned upon the MDOT approval. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we will open up the public hearing. Are there any members in the audience who wish to address the Planning Commission in regards to this petition? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, and I will read the very long motion. So please, everyone, be very patient. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission, after hearing all interested persons and reviewing all relevant information, including an accompanying site plan, finds the petition substantially meets the standards in Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Section 5.29.5, special exemptions, and Section 5.16.3.g, regulations concerning medical use of marijuana, and therefore approves the 1251 North Main special exemption use for a medical marijuana provisioning center. This approval is based on the following findings. 1, the proposed use will be consistent with the C3 Fringe Commercial District, which provides for commercial activities including retail establishments, offices, and personal services. 2, through modifications proposed, the use will not adversely impact traffic, pedestrians, bicyclists, circulation, or road intersections based on the location. North Main Street provides access to the site, and the proposed use is consistent with other surrounding use traffic impact. 3, through documentation submitted by the petitioner regarding waste disposal, inventory tracking, security, and other methods of operation of the facility, the provisioning center will be operated in a manner that will not have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties or area and will not have detrimental impact on natural features. This special exemption use approval is based on the following conditions. 1, the petitioner obtaining and maintaining both a state of Michigan medical marijuana license and a City of Ann Arbor medical marijuana permit, and providing documentation to the Planning Services Unit within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. 2, the petitioner operating a medical marijuana business at this address within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. 3, the petitioner will remove excess impervious surface and install all parking lot and driveway improvements shown on the site plan dated November 6, 2018, prior to the issuance of any certificate of occupancy. 4, the petitioner must obtain a permit from the Michigan Department of Transportation for proposed improvements to the North Main Street right-of-way. 5, the petitioner will maintain the operating hours of 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Saturday and 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday. And that the Ann Arbor Planning Commission approves the attached site plan which demonstrates compliance with the applicable special exemption use standards. Thank you. Do you have a commissioner that will move this? Moved by Commissioner Briggs, seconded by Commissioner Weatherby. We are in discussion. Commissioner Briggs.
So, my primary concerns with this project, my primary concern right now with the project deal with traffic. Basically, the current configuration seems like it is going to have an adverse impact on traffic, pedestrians, bicyclists, circulation, and road intersections, really all of them. So I know that wasn't at the August meeting where I think that this was initially discussed, and I can understand there's a lot that's been going back and forth in terms of trying to figure out a good circulation pattern there. But this is actually a business site I'm fairly familiar with. I work at the News Center, and so I'm familiar with trying to bike, walk, and drive along that area. So I'm trying to do my best with cutting down traffic there, and when I do, I bike. But when I get into my car, I would say 75% of the time, I need to turn right out of the News Center and then actually turn into this driveway to be able to get back onto North Main Street. The other alternative would be to go down to Huron River Drive. So circulation along North Main Street is a significant problem, which is not, the issue of this petitioner, but it is a problem, I think, doing this right turn in, right turn out. I just don't buy that customers to this site are going to choose to go down to Huron River Drive, come back and do a right turn here. And I think that they're going to turn left in and do even more dangerous maneuvers. And quite honestly, this is one business that's probably saving people from a lot of accidents along there anyway with the wide turnout. And I'd like to see a sidewalk the length of the facility. So I don't know if you could talk a little bit about how these decisions were reached, because even though I can understand how right turn in, right turn out seem safer, I just...
Yeah, it's a great question. This is one we truly struggled with, as you can probably tell, at the previous motion for denial. And they've spent quite a bit of time working with different ideas and different iterations of plans between the July meeting and obviously now this is January, so we had some months go through there. To really look at we look at the existing conditions on there, what existing zoning, what can move in there, and really tried to come up with the best possible solution. And you're right that any modification on the site, we're not there to enforce constantly. People can go around that. That is true. They tried to, we can say is that the traffic engineering, they've tried to engineer it at such an angle that it does make it significantly difficult. It will not, while it didn't rise to the level of, so that it didn't require a traffic study because it didn't have enough trip generation to do that. What they did have to do the trip generations in general to look at it. So, I can't add a lot more detail to her thinking other than that was the traffic was looked at and the peak times were looked at on that road, and to say, well, the chance with this configuration and when those peak times are people likely to make those illegal turns? Those were part of the rationale that she used, and as far as non-motorized connection, you're absolutely right. This is a site that has zero connection. The engineering department didn't even request a sidewalk placement in front of this at this time, simply there's no safe way to get to the site is non-motorized. So that's something that, again, we struggle with as staff to say, well, non-motorized is one of our key essential ingredients. How can we make this site safer for this and possibly future uses? So I didn't necessarily answer your question straight up. It is a difficult, that's something what the commission can work on as well, is whether or not the methods we have here in place would adequately address that.
I mean, I know
The
that North
safety.
Main Street is due for reconstruction by MDOT within the next few years.
Yes.
And best,
Yes, it is.
yeah, so North Main Street is due for reconstruction in the next couple of years, which hopefully will result in some sort of improved non-motorized facilities along there. I know that there's natural features that
Yes.
prohibit it, but something needs to be done to the roadway there. But why are the traffic engineers, I mean, would we not approve left turn in there? Was that a no-go from the city's perspective?
Correct. That was, so the main issue with the site, again, was not necessarily from a trip generation mode. It was really the safety of the turning movements. That was the main reason behind the recommendations previously, and to come up with a solution like this. It was the turning motions left in and left out.
I can
that were the
understand
main
left
source of
out,
concern.
but left in?
And
it-
left in as well. I mean, I think left out was a higher concern, but
Yeah.
because of you just creeping out things, but left turn in as well.
I don't know, it's a two-lane road there, this current configuration is problematic from my perspective, but I'll let others comment.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Briggs, for highlighting that. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Briggs, for highlighting the entrance exit, which I think is probably my focus as well. Could you just clarify there is no left entrance currently, nor a left exit currently? It'd be right in, right out.
Correct. It would be
exclusive.
right in and right out.
So,
Well, as proposed, currently it is, currently
Right.
it is
Currently it's
full
wide open.
access in any direction. Yeah.
very much understood. So I'm looking at the sign placement, and I guess working off the assumption that this is better than the current state, which is an assumption. I'm looking at the sign placement, and I appreciate, for the exit, the stop sign. I appreciate the right turn only sign at the exit. I note that for the entrance, there's a proposed no left turn sign, which I imagine would be for northbound traffic, informing them that they can't turn left into the property. Would there be any signage indicating that people should not take a northbound traffic should not take a left turn into the exit? I don't see signage for that, and I'm wondering if that was a consideration.
I'm not sure. I don't, like, it's hard to, we have the location of all the signage in here. I don't see
Yeah.
that one specifically there, but that could be something, obviously.
And I don't know how much signage you can add before there are line of sight issues,
And that will be, again, this will be an MDOT item. MDOT will review the signage and approve it as part of their permit.
would we rather send to MDOT a more inclusive package of signage as opposed to presuming this passes? Would we not,
could
would there
request-
be benefit of, more signage than less signage so that they can remove stuff as opposed to trusting MDOT to add
Add it.
pedestrian safety or, I guess, safety generally items? The other piece is the, not including the sidewalk, gives me a lot of pause. And I feel like at this, we've approved a lot of sidewalk islands, pieces of sidewalk that will, in the future, connect to a network of sidewalks, because that's our goal, of having all of our streets have a sidewalk as well. I think of property on, medical marijuana property on Jackson, and then I think of missed opportunities, not this current planning commission or planning staff, but I think of like the Shell gas station on Washtenaw Avenue. There are a lot of similarities between Washtenaw and Main Street, a lot of commuter traffic heading in and out of town, heading towards an MDOT freeway, and a lot of sidewalk gap issues. And there were missed opportunities along Washtenaw as properties were redeveloped, and I wouldn't want to miss any opportunities on North Main Street. So that gives me a lot of pause, not including the sidewalk. The other is, I know it's captured in the site plan, but I was looking at the elevation, and it doesn't appear as though the replanting of grass on the southern section is captured in the elevation. I just wanted to,
Yeah, it's on the
double
site
check.
plan though, for
It's
sure.
on the
So
site
that's
plan.
what we
Okay.
would go by more than the elevation.
all right, great.
Good catch.
Yeah, I think very similar to Commissioner Briggs, that we're this nervous about how, and that we have to limit the ways in which cars get on and off this property, is nerve-wracking. I'm having a hard time figuring out if this is better than the current situation. And I'm glad we have two commissioners that work on this corridor to speak to that. But also just, I want to triple check the signage to make sure we're not missing any possibilities of, collision. So I'll leave it there for now.
Commissioner Mills.
Thanks. Actually, I want to follow up on something that Commissioner Ackerman just said, which was about whether or not it's better than the current situation. And I think one of the differences here is that we're really talking about a retail kind of establishment or more traffic generated. And again, not peak times. And so, I mean, we've talked a lot about this as we've seen proposals like this come before us. The time that people will be, coming and going is not necessarily when there's the heaviest traffic, but these are quick trips. There's a decent number of them. And so that's what gives me pause here. If this were an office building and people were just like pulling in once a day, pulling out once a day, would they go down to do the UE and come back? Maybe, but this is like a quick trip. And so that's where I think that this is a little bit different than the current situation and other things that could go in here. I mean, anything that would go in here is going to suffer from the same turning motion problems, right? We have to give this, our ordinance says that we give this extra scrutiny to see if this is the right fit for this place. And I think a retail establishment is not the kind of thing that we would want to put in the situation where there's challenges with in and out. So I share the concern about not adding pedestrian amenities along that route. And I understand that we don't know what the design will be, especially because that west side of North Main has so many topographical challenges. But that really does seem like a missed opportunity. And so I would concur with that.
I guess I will say a couple. So I'm really concerned about the traffic on this site. I'm not as concerned about, I guess I should say the use of it, but the whole turning right and only right gives me it makes me more concerned than anything else, because I look at it just to the north of it is a driveway. And so how many people driving northbound will see that they can't turn left into the site, will turn into the next driveway. And North Main, I mean, I see accidents on North Main on a fairly regular basis. And also with the park across the street, of how many people are going to try to maneuver through that to get around here, it gives me a really big pause. I don't know if this is a solution. I just don't know if this is a solution that I can support. So that's my 2 cents at this point. And then I'll hand it over to Commissioner Sauvé.
So I'm the second commissioner that works on North Main, but I work closer to the U-turn, so I take the U-turn every day. So it does, I think the risk to traffic becomes a condition that I see every day, because left turns out of Lakeshore Drive there's a sign there, but people don't abide by that, and that's where, at this intersection is where we do see a lot of those accidents. If this is going to actually encourage more risk-taking with the right turn, or less risk-taking because they're the forced kind of U-turn and directional challenge, I think is, something that we can work on our kind of experience assumptions or traffic engineer data. I know it's the petitioner's traffic engineer data, but and you know the review of council, the planning department. So I'm kind of more from where it was to where it is that it's been recommended for approval. I do kind of have to believe traffic-wise that there's been due diligence that this is the better solution of what's been proposed, and that if any use that is less scrutinized comes in here, would we create that issue anyway? So as a C3 fringe district, we could end up with a use that could create this issue without these requirements that we could apply. And so that's actually how I'm trying to approach the project. Is what chance do we have to put requirements on this project that we wouldn't have otherwise? I think the sidewalk is definitely kind of an add that I would support. I think to Commissioner Ackerman's point about adding a do not enter sign on the back of the right turn only sign, you know, it's just a smart way to add more signage and then MDOT reviews. So I'm kind of trusting the progress of the engineers here, and that this is kind of our opportunity to require more changes to the site that we wouldn't otherwise have.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
I'm in the middle on this one, but I think I'm kind of leaning towards what Commissioner Sauvé is saying, because if I understand this correctly, basically if the existing business leaves, a retail business can go in that is a fast food restaurant, right? I mean, it's like we could get something and not review it and have the current configuration of the layout because they're just changing from business to business, and we don't have a distinction between a business that has peak hours during this time and a business that has peak hours during that time. So
That's correct.
I don't like this configuration either. I think that, you know, I looked at it and I'm like, just a second, how are they going to take a left turn into there? And they'll figure it out pretty fast, or what's going to happen is the corner of that thing is just going to get busted off or something. But I think that it is awkward and it's pretty much impossible to be able to get in that way. So I think people will probably figure it out. But I mean, you can though go all the way down to the next street too, right? There's the Huron View or whatever before Huron River Drive. Yeah, I mean that's what I do when I have to take a right on the News Center. Is I go down there and turn around. So I think there's no easy solution here, but I guess I feel like we have more control if we get these improvements with this time around, rather than another business that we won't have any control over. And they'll have the same ridiculously wide curb cut. I mean, it's a pretty crappy site. You know, and they can just keep it the way it is. I think the building looks a whole lot nicer than it does now. I guess I feel like it's not bad, is kind of what I feel like in terms of, and I appreciate the fact that we get a little more control over this than if somebody else just moved in and did whatever they wanted to. Part of the issue on North Main is that the right-of-way is just way too small. And so you can see the line on there. And you can feel it on the other side of the road where there is a sidewalk for most of it, is that it's right next to the road and people are screaming down from the highway or up to the highway. It feels incredibly insecure. So there's no magic solution for North Main. I don't know if we can get more right-of-way or what, but it's not going to be easy in there. It really isn't, because it feels incredibly insecure to walk along, you know, right along the road there. So there's no easy one. I mean, I'd support a little segment of sidewalk, but I also feel pretty realistic about what the potential is in that area, and it's not going to be easy, folks, if we don't have the right-of-way there, because of the traffic speeds that are going along there. So I'm not loving this project, but I guess that's where I am in terms of feeling kind of realistic about what our options are for the future and what kind of control we have.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Thank you. I've wrestled with a lot of the same concerns and reactions, and I think I similarly was approaching my thinking the way Commissioner Sauvé sort of laid it out, which is a zone to allow for a retail use, and we could get a retail use here without any ability to make any changes. And I want to be able to trust the traffic engineers here that this is better. Yeah, and it's crappy. It's not a great site, and it's gonna be tough. Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if I have anything to add. I think with the sidewalk, the design is challenging, especially if we go with this drive configuration, like how the sidewalk would go through there, and how that would even make sense, like work is challenging. Although it does look like there's a little cow path going into the park from there, so some people do walk that way. So maybe it makes sense just to acknowledge that connection. Although I really don't want to invite people to be walking across Main here if we can avoid it. And the other thing I'll just note is and I'm hoping this changes, but MDOT has indicated not a whole lot of interest in doing anything with this reconstruction other than reconstruction within the existing right-of-way, at least the last I've heard on this reconstruction project. So the odds of us getting a really big investment for pedestrian right-of-way on the other side of the street there is pretty low. Not that we should plan around what they want to do or accept that that's going to be the reality, but that's where I would put my money. Yeah, I don't love it. I think this is probably at least marginally better than what we get with nothing.
Commissioner Woods.
Well, I won't repeat everything that's been said, but I agree with my commissioners. And so for the petitioner, I have a couple of questions. As you've been listening to our discussion about our concerns for the turning in and out for the facility, I'm wondering if there might not be ways for you, you know, part of what we're saying is we're hoping that the signage will pass the scrutiny of the state of Michigan and that sort of thing. But I'm wondering also, will you be able to perhaps either on your flyers or whatever you're going to use to do your advertising, or perhaps even when people come in and then they're leaving, would you be able to remind them about the turning in and out? Because the bottom line is if we end up with a lot of, or any accidents in that vicinity, that certainly is going to come back and, you know, be a concern for not only us around the table, but also.
Definitely. We totally understand that as a company. And through this process, it's been a very long process. This has definitely been the safest alternative to that entrance. And the actual layout, proposed layout of the way the concrete would be, making a left turn in would not be ideal. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody would imagine to make a left turn in. However, if anyone's going to make any legal turn, they could do anywhere at any time. We also propose to put a camera out towards that angle, and if we do notice any patients actually leaving using the turn the wrong way, we will be able to contact those patients and let them know that is something that we discuss as a team. We have also, as a company, have been involved in one of those segment sidewalks that up to this point just go to the middle of the grass for future plans, and we would not be against doing something like that. We would prefer not to have to build out the sidewalk until the future catches up, but we wouldn't mind being obligated for a promise or even leaving a deposit in good faith that we would build a sidewalk. We're really looking forward to this location. It's no offense to our great landlord, but it's a little bit of an eyesore, and it's going to be a very nice place on Main Street, and it's going to serve a great purpose. We are a good company. and we're vertically integrated. And I think that this is all going to be something positive to Main Street, especially the rendering of the plans. And we will do whatever we need to do in order to be able to get that location to be a medical marijuana provisioning center. And that's how we've been going about this the whole time.
You mentioned vertically integrated. Can you tell me what that means?
That's correct. So we have a grow facility as well as a processing facility to actually ensure that we are growing our own medicine for our own patients, creating our own milligrams of capsules here in the future and edibles, and being able to microdose these milligrams and basically listening to what our patients are asking for and trying to put out products that are specific and purposeful to them and not just anything for retail.
Okay. And then one other question I have. So if someone's going north on Main Street towards M14 and they have to go up and make that, whatever we call it, Michigan left or whatever, and come back down to get into the into your facility. But if someone is going south on Main Street and they miss their right turn, how far up does someone have to go before they're going to find a place to turn around or something to come back?
That's a great question. And I don't have an exact answer for how far up they would go. I would hope not too far.
Okay.
And I would also hope that everybody, like myself, follows all sign rules, stop signs, yield signs, all signs. And I'd like to comment that this is definitely, I heard a lot from the board of the fact that being that this is a SCU is given the chance to actually monitor and improve this location. However, if it was not for special exception use and it was a party liquor store, there would be no modifications, and I'd imagine it'd be 3 times as busy.
That's true. So we're not trying to make additional work for the AAPD around here, but, you know, so that's why we want it to work for everyone.
and I appreciate it, and all of the comments and the feedback are everything that we've been through as a company, and that this proposed plan with right in and right out only, I truly believe should solve almost all of these concerns. Okay. And with us as a company also taking the extra step to put a camera on that, because we don't want any accidents there. It's a patient center, so we don't want any kind of accidents. We don't want any complaints. So we would want to ensure that after all of this, that there wouldn't be any complaints. So we would take the proper initiation and to make sure that everything does run smoothly, even if for the first so many months we had to have, you know, somebody out there and just making sure. We're willing to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Weatherby.
I just want to say I do agree with sort of the last comments. I think that this is a legal retail space, and I think it's, I can't quite see saying no because of the traffic issues. That said, I would like to see the sidewalk, in part because when I look at it on the map, there's the potential for sidewalk to connect north eventually. That's not quite as small, and, you know, long-term, maybe lease some parking spots or have a little bit, I can see where people might walk from this building north. I think walking south is going to be a little bit tricky because of the right-of-way narrowness, but I would like to see a sidewalk here, and I do think the building is much nicer, and I think it will make that entrance to the city look better than it does right now, which I think there is some benefit to that. So that's where I am. I do think the traffic issue is tricky. You know, I think, but there are more properties north of this and south. I'm trying to look on the map to see exactly where the city owns, but, you know, we do have other properties along this route, and if we're going to say we can't have any retail along here, then we probably need to make that decision now, not when each group comes in. But I think I would like to see a sidewalk.
Commissioner Briggs.
So going back to my concerns, which have not changed, I'm not, to clarify, I'm not suggesting that I don't think retail is appropriate there, because I actually think this might be one of the most appropriate businesses to have there. People can really schedule when they can go there. They don't have to go there during peak hours. And anybody who goes there, I think somebody who makes that mistake once, a customer would choose not to. And I think actually most retail businesses, people would, if they have that option, would choose not, which makes me think that the vast majority of the traffic going in and out of this will not be going at peak hours. And so I just don't understand the prohibition on left turn in. I think it's not appropriate or safe to be sending people to the U-turn, which is right at the exit of M14, a known crash location, or sending people up that the street there, which is, there's not great maneuverability there either. I just am not comfortable suggesting that we have right turn in, right turn out makes a lot of sense. I think people can easily go down and if they're trying to go the other direction, go down to Summit and do that sort of loop around. It's not convenient, but it's possible, whereas what we're sending people out north just doesn't make sense, especially for retail. And so I would like to push back that I think that left turn in here really makes sense, and it actually is the safer situation. And I think our traffic engineers should re-examine, if this is retail, realistically, it's not office. If it was office, and people were coming out at peak hours, then I completely understand. But for a retail establishment, left turn in makes a lot of sense, and I think it's the safest maneuver here. And I think people are going to do it anyway, and we're going to create this even more dangerous situation where people are maneuvering in ways that they shouldn't. And definitely, I think a sidewalk makes sense here. We see the cow path. Anybody who's coming in from the Huron River side, there is that cow path. You get stuck on that side of the road. I have occasionally done this, and I'm like, oh, why did I do this? And then you're stuck over there. And so even if it's for a short segment, not to mention it's right at the entrance to Bluffs Park. And when it comes to MDOT, I think we need to be pushing really, this is the first project that we're seeing a lot along North Main Street that sort of articulates a lot of these issues for us. I think we need to be really clear that traffic needs to be slowed here, that this is something we need to push harder than anything in recent history to make sure that MDOT actually does what they need to along here. Yes, it's an expensive investment, but it's not appropriate to say that development isn't going to occur. Either we need to shut off development on that side of the road, or we need to make accommodations so that people aren't getting killed. So I can't support this in the current configuration with just a right turn in. But is there any opportunity to his traffic engineers, would they be willing to I'm just not sure if they have 100% said left turn in is a no-go, or if that's...
I don't know that they looked at the left turn only option, left turn in only option and right turn out option. But I do know their biggest concerns were the left turn movements to and from the site.
Right.
So I don't think that they specifically looked at that one.
So that's the one that I would like to encourage. I think that needs to be explored further.
The left turn in.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I was gonna just restate that I think a sidewalk is a must-have. The main entrance to Bluffs Park is there, and also we're adding additional office space just to the north of here. And when we talk about the topographical issues for the sidewalk, it's mostly to the south of the site. And I think that's exactly right. As MDOT takes a look at this, we need to be showing that our planning is moving into more urban context here. So I think sidewalk is a have-to-have. I think I'm still going to be really cautious of a left turn only. I'm already cautious of 2 right turn onlys. I guess I'd look to Mr. Leonard about, there are a few outstanding items and what your recommendation would be and how to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
Sure. Well, I guess I'm hearing two principal issues, both related to traffic. I think the sidewalk is probably, in my view, the easiest. If you think that a sidewalk is important, I would suggest we add a condition that a sidewalk be provided. I would suggest that any such condition probably provides some degree of flexibility, both for the city's benefit and the petitioner's benefit, that it could be either located within the right-of-way or that they provide the necessary easement for it to be located on private property. And we could certainly work with engineering and traffic engineering staff to locate that, and also locate it in the context of that proposed turn movement arrangement. As it relates to the right in, right out, as Mr. Kowalski said, the principal concern that our traffic engineer reviewers had on this was both left turn movements in and left turn movements out. You can disagree with that for sure. We could ask them to look at that split configuration, but I don't think they looked at it in detail, but they did communicate to us that their concern was those turning movements. That was, and doing our best to address those. You'll recall that one of the other ways that this was looking at was the petitioner originally was proposing to shut the business down between 4 and 6 o'clock every day, so as to avoid the peak trip hours. That's a very difficult thing for us to enforce. I think it's practically a difficult thing for them as a business operator to enforce. So that's why we were not comfortable with that as a solution. We agree with this as a better solution. By no stretch will you find our traffic engineer being able to assure you that no left turn movements will be made. But our intention is to make that as severe of an angle as possible. It's got to be compliant with MDOT standards, which we believe this design is. And then the last piece of signage, again, sort of like sidewalks, I think that's relatively easy. I would be reluctant for us to dictate specifically what signage, but rather direct our traffic staff to make sure that we're being as instructive as we possibly can to minimize the undesired movements through that physical configuration. Ultimately, it does have to be approved by MDOT. So as it relates to the signage and the sidewalk, I would suggest if there seems to be sort of a consensus, those would be conditions to add. As it relates to the physical configuration of the right in, right out, I guess I would suggest that's up to the commission. If you'd like us to pose that, and we could get some response back from traffic if that's a preferred approach, or take action on it without that advice, either in the affirmative or denial tonight. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, I think before we discuss any further, I think I would want to move a condition that the sidewalk be added no matter what, if this goes up or down. I think that's necessary. So, Mr. Leonard, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, a proposed condition might be that the petitioner will provide any necessary easement and construct a public sidewalk for the length of frontage along North Main on this property.
Okay, I would make that motion.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of amending the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's approved.
Another potential amendment, that city traffic engineers, that the petitioner work with city traffic engineers to ensure that signage is appropriate and maximized to discourage associated left turns in both directions.
I would make that motion as well.
Seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor to the amendment to the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's approved.
I'm good for right now. Thank you.
Further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? Oh, Mr. Kowalski.
I just need to ask a question for clarification regarding the sidewalk. The timing of the sidewalk installation or easement granting, I don't know if that,
Normally, it would be required prior to an issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
right, okay, we didn't include that, so I want to make sure that was out for the commission. Okay.
All right. Commissioner Mills.
This is a tricky one, right? Because this is something where we do have additional discretion. It is other uses wouldn't have to come before us. My question, though, is, and I appreciate that the petitioner was talking about having security cameras pointed to, like, monitor traffic violations, effectively turning in and out of their customers. That we have a couple commissioners with eyes on that street, too, helps in terms of monitoring what's going on. But can you remind us, we have the land use component, like that's what we take care of for these, but they also get city licensing. And is there something about safety within city licensing that if we realize that this is not a safe location, when they come for renewal, I mean, can you talk about if that factors in or not?
I would say no. From a traffic circulation, that review is happening at this table with review of the traffic engineers, and you are recommending on that conclusion. There are safety aspects of the operation of the facility. The clerk's permit is largely reliant upon the state license for satisfaction of those requirements. The state licensing requirements are much more robust. We do ask for some of that material. However, as Commissioner Ackerman discussed in reports, there's been some suggestion to actually require less of that at the city level because the state is providing such a more detailed analysis of it. So while that process does involve safety, it tends to be more, I think, in the internal operational side of things. As it relates to traffic and circulation, I think that's the purview of this body.
So to be clear, if this body were to approve it today, and even if it's not this petitioner, right, the special exception use is granted and it runs with the property. So as long as some petitioner were to build such a facility within 2 years, 3 years, whatever our motion says, it's there as long as they hold a state, and it can remain as a provisioning center as long as they hold a state license, or some other company holds a license from the state.
Correct. And just to take a step back, a couple of commissioners have mentioned it, and I think you're right on your analysis. We've struggled with a staff perspective as well. The dynamic of this as a special exception use versus as some permitted C3 use. It is true, absolutely, that if some permitted use were to go into that existing space, there are a wide variety of uses that are permitted in the C3 district, that we wouldn't be having this conversation. They'd be getting building permits, they'd be opening. A more substantial reconstruction, like into a fast food restaurant with circulation patterns, that would likely still be a site plan review. So I don't want to say that that's absolute either. That could come into play. But at the core, the question is, for this use in this facility, is the traffic and circulation issues addressed to the satisfaction of this board for this particular use? I think that is the core of the question. I think there's a tendency, and again, we were drawn into that as well, but that's the question at hand. You are making a decision that, based on the advice of us, the traffic engineers, that the primary concern with circulation here was turning movements, and we believe that this furthers and advances and makes a better, more safe turning movement condition. But we fully recognize that the special exception use is a more broad construction of circulation. So I feel you.
Thanks a lot. Something, as I'm looking at something in the packet, looking a bit farther out about how things are zoned on North Main, there's not actually a whole lot to see, right? So this is a commercial island. And so it could have retail in it it hasn't had retail in it because it's a bad location. And so I am very much with Commissioner Briggs, I think, on this. That I just think that people are going to, they're going to find a way to turn left into it. Maybe not out of it, but turn left into it. And so, yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
I guess I am inclined to trust our traffic engineers on this one. I feel like if we make it possible to make a left turn in, then what's going to happen is people are going to make a left turn out. I think that's what's going to happen. And I think that, because who wants to go all the way down and turn around again if you don't have to? And I think that's more dangerous in some ways, because then somebody turning in and somebody coming out, I think that's way more likely to happen, because it's the straight shot. And I feel like this discourages people from trying to make that move, and they'll try it once and be like, whoa, that didn't work very well. And you're still going to get people that do it occasionally, but I feel like if we make it right turn out, left turn in, that we're going to invite more problems than if we leave it the way that it is. So that's I'm inclined to trust our traffic engineers.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Sorry, I realize I'm speaking a lot. I think I would not welcome left turn in or left turn out in any form, which leaves us to right turn in, right turn out. And I'm looking at crash data from SEMCOG over the last 5-6 years. And we look at this corridor, and there are 2 nodes where we see, or I guess 3 nodes where we see heavy crash incidents. We see a lot of car accidents happening at the corner of Depot to the south. We see a lot of accidents happening, not surprisingly, on the on and off ramp of M14 and the turnaround at Huron River Drive. So it's about 130 crashes over the last 5 years to the north at M14, about 120 to the south at the corner of Depot, and about 60 to 65 in the 100 feet north and 100 feet south from this intersection. And if right turn in and right turn out is the best solution, we're just pushing people towards the higher incident crash areas, towards the more dangerous areas, towards the hot areas. And I don't know as if I can vote for something that, in the best case scenario, pushes people towards more dangerous areas and increases the number of turning motions in those more dangerous areas.
Commissioner Woods.
Commissioner Ackerman, I'm not sure I quite understood what you were saying.
Sure. It was Commissioner Briggs who mentioned, and I agree, that by having these right turn in, right turn out only, you're going to be pushing people to do their turnarounds up at M14 near Huron River Drive, where there are twice as many crashes as the area we're talking about right now. So by requiring that people, in order to get to this location, turn around in a very dangerous area, you're increasing the likelihood of dangerous activity in an already dangerous area, or at least increasing the amount of traffic in a dangerous area where there are dangerous turns that people have to make. Is that more clear? I'm not sure I made that more clear.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Then
Yeah.
you said you couldn't vote for it. So what are you saying you can vote for? You're saying right now, as we have made the amendments, or as it stands, are you saying that as you've looked at the crash data, you are more inclined to vote for the petition, or you're less inclined?
I'm more
I'm
more comfortable with it now that the amendment's passed, and I'm glad they're there in case this moves forward, but I personally don't feel as though I can vote for it, the entire project.
Oh, okay, all right, just, and the crash data is certainly something that I think we all want to take into account, but then we don't really know who was involved in those crashes. Where, is it someone who's coming out of North Main, the New Center, or were those folks who were doing something along that corridor anyway, who aren't necessarily I mean, you know, without knowing the specifics, I think we could, what do I want to say? I guess I want to go back and say that I'm going to trust that the traffic engineers are correct this time. And I do appreciate that you're saying, are we sending people towards a place where they're going to be possibly more inclined to be in an accident? Or if we do it the other way, are we just spreading out where the accidents are going to happen? And rather than happening up there at those nodes, they might happen in the middle. Or maybe we don't have accidents at all.
Yeah.
But, you know.
I certainly appreciate that and won't think less of any colleagues for voting for this if they wanted. And the traffic engineers have done a good job with the situation they have, which isn't a great one. And I think this is certainly the safest way that we could get something like this to work if we wanted it to. And I think that the current state is safer than this proposed state, but certainly this proposed state is probably safer than the worst-case scenario of something by right. So I'm not, it's certainly complex, and I have to make a yes or no decision.
Okay.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So what would, if this passes and it's right turn, and then we find that there are crashes, we could change that, correct?
We have the ability to adjust public right-of-way, but if we're approving a site plan with specific requirements that it function in a certain way,
Or I guess what would be the mechanism?
Yeah, it might
for-
require an administrative site plan amendment in this case, because I doubt it would result in any sort of expansion of parking area. But it probably would still require an administrative amendment. So yes, it's absolutely possible, excuse me.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Yeah, I'm really torn on this. And I think I'm inclined to support it, but I think I've been convinced that getting the sidewalk is a good idea. I think the arguments there are compelling, as in part due to the demonstration to MDOT on our intentions here, and knowing that there is an administrative amendment option possible in the future if the city looks at this change configuration and thinks we can make an improvement, that actually gives me a little bit of comfort. But yeah, I'm very much on the fence. I'm also, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about what happens on North Main kind of further along in the future, which is all up in the air, but and what that means for Lakeshore Drive, which could change what we want to do here again later, but that can happen later. Yeah, anyway, that's where I'm at.
All right, are we ready for a vote? All right, we will do a roll call vote.
Starting with Commissioner Ackerman.
Are you going to call our names or?
He did.
Commissioner
did.
Ackerman. So the question is approval of the main motion subject to the added conditions of requiring a sidewalk, as well as consultation with the traffic engineer to ensure that we're maximizing signage to try and restrict, to encourage reliance on the right in, right out to the greatest extent possible. Yay or nay?
Jackie does this so much more
Better.
smoothly.
She's way better than I am. Commissioner Ackerman.
No.
Commissioner Briggs.
No.
Commissioner Gibrandel.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
No.
Commissioner Milstein.
No.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Yes.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Yes.
Commissioner Woods.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The motion fails.
Thank you. Moving
We need
on
6.
to regular
We need 6.
business.
So for, the question came up, while a majority of commissioners did vote in the affirmative, it requires 6 affirmative votes of the Planning Commission to advance any petition.
Thank you. Moving on to regular business. 10A, 2625 Valley Drive annexation and zoning for city council approval. I don't believe we have a petitioner here this evening.
No.
So we'll head on to a staff report.
Thank you. Okay, so 2625 Valley Drive. It's a rather small parcel. It's 4,636 square feet. It's currently in Scioto Township. You can see it on the aerial photo right here. It's a rather narrow parcel. It's 30, I believe it's 30 feet wide. It's 30.82 feet wide. However, it is a lot of record, so a house could be constructed on that if they can fit a house within a 30-foot wide parcel. So anyway, at this time, the petitioner is requesting annexation, and staff is recommending an R1C zoning, which is consistent with the adjacent area.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and read the motion. The motion states, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Durling annexation and R1C single-family dwelling district zoning 2625 Valley Drive. Do I have a commissioner who will move this? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Woods. Discussion. Commissioner Mills.
So this seems to be creating a non-conforming parcel because don't you have to have a minimum lot width in R1C of 60 feet?
Correct, but or unless it's a lot of record. This is a lot of record that's
Okay.
being annexed. So it would be different if we were creating a new lot. We could not do that. But because this is a lot of record in the township right now, and our zoning code does call that out, if you do on a non-conforming lot of record, you can, the only thing you construct is a single-family house. So the code does give you the assurances for cases like this. If you can fit a house, and the setbacks in the R1C are 5 feet. So you essentially have a 20-foot wide building envelope, which is possible.
Okay, got it. Thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
And also, like, this comes up a lot, the width for, multifamily districts, and that is right, that's the caveat. You can build single family,
Yep.
you just can't build multifamily if you don't have a wide enough lot.
Correct.
So thank you
Yep,
very
you're
much.
welcome.
Any other discussion? All right. I guess we're ready for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose? It is approved. Moving on to 10B, Mallett's Wood, 2 amended PUD zoning and site plan for city council approval. Mr. Leonard.
Yeah, before we invite the petitioner up, I just want to give the Planning Commission and the members of the audience a quick background. You've seen this proposal previously as a rezoning. It was proposed to rezone the southern portion of a former combined plan unit development to another zoning district. My apologies to the petitioner and to the commissioner. After that happened, we concluded that that was not, in fact, the appropriate process because the original PUD had certain obligations to fulfill as a project that was developed in totality. And to then just remove half of that, that would create issues where the former would be relying on actual aspects of the rezoned area for the PUD satisfaction, which would in fact create a non-conforming situation for the first phase of the PUD. So we appreciate the petitioner's resubmission of this under the appropriate process. You're seeing it as an amendment to the planned unit development. It is in fact for all intents and purposes, the identical site plan that was previously considered by the Planning Commission under a different mechanism. And now I'll shut up and let you get to the normal order of business.
All right, we will begin with the petitioner's presentation. You will have up to 10 minutes to address the Planning Commission this evening.
Okay, first of all, thank you, and I think, I don't know how many of you have seen the previous presentation. First of all, I'm Joe Maynard with Washington Engineering. I'm also here with Bill Kinley, he's the developer. And as Brent, as you noted, this is a continuation of an existing PUD. We are proposing 19 single-family homes. You've got the site plan. Let's see if we can get rid of that other part there. So we've got the existing site plan there. Let me go through my list here. So, and I think, Jill, your review letter actually covered a lot of the points that we were looking to make. There currently is no structures on the property now. It's just a wooded lot that's developed over the years. I think it was cleared at one point in time. Part of it was previously cleared for the road extension. Let's see. Some of the benefits that we're actually looking in this project outside of the original park donation, we have some wetlands on site that we're maintaining. We're actually going to create 2 pedestrian walkways, one on the, I'll get my bearings right, north end of the property, and then one at the end of the cul-de-sac, which will connect straight down through to the park property. Stormwater management, there's an existing stormwater pond that's actually down at the end of Cardinal near Mallett's Creek. Part of our site will discharge to there. The roadway cul-de-sac will have a rain garden in it to pre-treat some of the water. And then we also have an area in the back of the first 2 lots that we've actually found some really good sands that will do some infiltration and pre-treatment there. I'll go to the next page here. I can figure out how to do this. How do I get to the next page? There we go. So we've got some sample homes here. The homes will be built to the current energy code. Owners will have some opportunities if they need to do miscellaneous upgrades. If they've got an electric car, you know, the builder will work with them to install electric car charging stations and things like that. All the homes will have garages, so there's the 1-car garage. Some may be, I think some of them are 2-car garages. You'll have places for bikes. Your trash storage will be inside so that you can keep everything neat and clean there. 1 2-story homes. So you've got just a sample of home plans here. And then we'll get to the last item here, which is the landscaping. So, like I said, there's a number of nice trees on the site. There's also a number of smaller, dead, dying trees. We're actually proposing to remove, I think it's somewhere around, I don't even know where that's at. Well, we've got a number of trees to be removed, but we're keeping about 33% open space and 59 landmark trees, and only 23 of those will be removed. So we also have a cash contribution for the trees that we can't mitigate to the city's tree fund. So I think that covers everything. Like I said, Jill, I think you'll go through a lot of this stuff too, so if I didn't already cover what was in your letter. Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm not sure. As Mr. Leonard said, this is essentially exactly the same plan that we submitted last May. I think it was unanimously approved by this body. It's the same site plan. We've modified the detention pond slightly to make it more agreeable to the existing condo owners, all of which have approved this plan. The neighbors, we've had now 3 different community meetings, and we've had no real opposition at all. So we think it's a good plan. The planning staff has all approved it. We worked diligently with the city forester and saved trees. We actually eliminated 2 lots in the process. So I think that everybody on planning staff is comfortable with it at this point. So we're pleased to bring it forward and here to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. We'll now head to Ms. Thatcher for a staff report.
That mouse.
Can't drive without it. Thank you. I have just a few things to add. So, yes, this is the same petition that came through before. Future land use plan does recommend single-family detached dwellings, which is what is being proposed here. Vehicle and bicycle parking will be provided one space for each minimum inside garages for each single-family detached house. The stormwater, just basically to touch on, the new Sharon Court, which will be public, meets the Green Streets ordinance, and the first 1 inch will be captured and treated in a rain garden in the center of the cul-de-sac. As Mr. Maynard mentioned, the detention basin that's existing on the Mallettswood 1 site has been improved, and most of the stormwater will go there. Some of it will be directed to infiltration area to help recharge some wetlands. The traffic analysis showed an increase of 23 AM trips and 24 PM trips, so this did not trigger a full traffic study, which would require 50 trips. And on the natural features, the tree mitigation, the reason for the cash contribution, the reason that's necessary is there are so many trees on the site already that the city tree managers said you just can't plant them or they will die. There are too many trees to plant more trees underneath the existing trees. And there are supplemental regulations. It's basically the Mallettswood 1 supplemental regulations are exactly the same. Nothing has changed from those because we're not touching that half of the site. The supplemental regulations for Mallettswood 2 are broken out of those. So you'll notice that each topic in the supplementary regs has an MW1 and an MW2 so that they can be addressed separately, one for each site plan. That concludes staff report, unless you want me to go into greater detail on anything or show you site pictures. And I do recommend approval of both petitions.
Jill, could you go through any site pictures that you do have?
Sure. So this is Cardinal Drive. This is looking, oh, help me get my bearings here. I'm looking north, thank you. And here's looking south. Sharon Drive is here, and the new Sharon Court would go in back here. I think that's all I have for photos. There's an interesting photo in the staff report that shows what it looked like in 1947. So you can really see how trees have grown up on the site since then. It was basically cleared for cultivation back in the 40s.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open a public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this item? Seeing nobody, I will close the public hearing and I will read two motions that we have. If it's okay with everyone, we'll take the two motions together. All right. Motion number 1, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Mallettswood 2 amended plan unit development, PUD zoning and supplemental regulations. And motion number 2, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Mallettswood 2 amended planned unit development, site plan, and development agreement. Do you have a commissioner that will move? Moved by Commissioner Weatherby, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. We are in discussion. Commissioner Mills.
I just want to reread the sentence from the staff report that is amazing to me. And why this came back. The petitioner obtained letters from each of the 14 property owners of Mallettswood. Like that, I don't recall this there being controversy the first time it came before us, but that you get the neighbors to like give you a letter saying you can build it. Like we just don't see that. I think that this is a good indication that this fits with the neighborhood. And we don't see this. So I think that's nice.
To be clear, Commissioner Mills, they were required.
Oh, well.
But yep, they're all there.
Either way, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Man, I thought it was
Goodness of the heart. Thanks for bursting my bubble.
Commissioner Briggs.
I just wanted to say thanks to the petitioner for the patience in terms of going through this process again. Obviously, there was an error on our part, so thank you.
All right, we're ready for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's approved. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Just pull it out. Yeah, thanks.
Next up on your agenda is the capital improvements plan. We don't, as this has already been presented to the Planning Commission at a working session fully, we haven't added any additional presentation for you, but Ms. Goslin is here for any questions. One of the things that came up over the course of the last working session was a question about the scoring, weighting, and evaluation. With Ms. Goslin's great counsel, I did my best to explain how those factors were applied, how they were arrived at, and how they are applied through the scoring process. So what you have in front of you is the result of a lot of substantial work by a number of teams across many disciplines, identifying both projects that we've had on our list for some time, as well as new potential projects in those disciplines, going through a ranking through those weighting processes, and presenting the capital improvements plan for you this evening. As a reminder, the Planning Commission is the appropriate body that takes action to approve the capital improvements plan. But alas, until somebody gives you the checkbook, City Council has a fair say in that too, as they decide what projects proceed through budgeting and the like.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing on the capital improvements plan. Those in the audience who wish to address the Planning Commission, please step forward, state your name for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to speak before the Planning Commission.
Or 5 for an organization, right?
Or 5 for an organization.
I'm Larry Deck, 3050 Lorraine Street, speaking on behalf of the Washtenaw Bicycling and Walking Coalition. I want to talk about the border-to-border trail projects that are in your capital improvements plan, and specifically the 3 gaps in that system in Ann Arbor and a nearby project. The places are between Vandermeer Park and Barton Park at the north side of the city, north of M14. And there's 3 projects in the area of the Maiden Lane Fuller intersection. In 2017, I addressed this body on behalf of WBWC, and appreciate your inclusion of one of our suggestions in the plan. And what's happened since 2017, there's some good news and some bad news. The good news is that project got included in the plan, and also about a mile of the B2B trail surface in Gallup Park a couple years ago was resurfaced and slightly widened. That's the good news. The bad news is that there's no other good news in Ann Arbor. There's a lot of good news around the county in terms of the border-to-border trail system. Jurisdictions all around the county are implementing things. This year, another 5 miles of B2B trail is scheduled to come online, but nothing is happening in Ann Arbor right now. So we think it's important to get these projects prioritized. They're important because the B2B trail is the backbone of the non-motorized system in the county and in Ann Arbor. It's been in the parks plan of the city and the transportation plan in the city for decades. It's also, of course, in the countywide B2B plan. One of these projects, or a couple of the projects, actually connect to the proposed campus-to-campus bikeway, which would make it possible to bike safely and efficiently between Central Campus and North Campus. Currently, there's no way to do that. And the B2B trail is a part of the statewide Iron Bell Trail, which runs from, the proposal runs from Belle Isle in Detroit to Ironwood in the Upper Peninsula, part of a statewide trail system. So these projects have statewide and countywide and citywide importance. In our view, these are some of the most important projects in the city because it's a heavily used part of the trail. The most heavily used part of the border-to-border trail is in Ann Arbor. And from a safety standpoint, these projects address safety concerns that are significant safety concerns. Looking at the plans from 2017 and comparing it to now, the projects have gotten all delayed. The Vandenberg to Barton connection was supposed to be built this year in 2019. It's been delayed till 2021 and 22. The Fuller Maiden Lane projects have been delayed from 2021 and 22 till beyond 2026, whatever that means. So basically, they're not scheduled. I can go over this in detail with you on your plan if you'd like. But we think it's important to get the priority of these moved up. We're not sure what the issue is. Funding is not the issue. There's significant countywide and statewide and private funding to help make these projects happen. So the city's contribution would not be that great in comparison to the other contributions. Our guess is it's more a matter of will and awareness of the importance of these things. To users know how important these projects are. People who bicycle or walk or run know how important these are to getting around town. And we think the priority should be moved up. So what we would ask is that you do whatever you can to help move these projects sooner on the implementation schedule and help City Council identify the matching funding to help make these projects happen. I'd be happy to answer any questions or to meet with you privately as necessary to explain these things. These are important things to get done from a standpoint of safety and non-motorized mobility in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Clark Chernesky, and tonight I am representing the Michigan Association of Railroad Passengers. We're an organization of about 200 Michigan citizens, all volunteers, and we've been in operation for over 40 years in order to promote rail and intercity bus travel. The item I'm going to especially talk about tonight has to do with the further phases for the Ann Arbor station replacement. And already work has been done on the environmental studies and so forth. We're hoping that'll come to a conclusion by summer. And in the plan, the capital improvement plan, are two items. One is for the final design of a station, and the second for actually construction of phase one. The Ann Arbor station is a very busy station. It handles more passengers than Detroit and Dearborn combined. It has been that way for many years. There are about 150,000 train passengers, and I estimate somewhere around 50,000 intercity bus passengers that use that station every day. In the last few days, I've been putting something together. I've been wondering how often does a bus or a train pull into the station each day, and it's 21 times a day. A bus like Greyhound or a train like Amtrak and other bus carriers use the station, and it has been doing that for the last 2 years. I also was wondering how many places can you get to from Ann Arbor without having to transfer to another bus or train. And actually there are 40 destinations in 4 states and also in Ontario. You can go to places like you're used to, Dearborn, Detroit, Kalamazoo, but also you can go to Fort Wayne, Indianapolis, South Bend, of course Chicago, Cincinnati, Toledo, London, Ontario, and Toronto, all from Ann Arbor without having to change bus or train. Ann Arbor and Detroit are the 2 remaining cities that need a new station. And Detroit is to replace a temporary station in the new center area, and the state already has land for that project. And of course, in Ann Arbor, the present station is woefully inadequate, both in terms of the size of the waiting room and also especially in terms of long-term parking. If you arrive at the station past noon on a Friday, forget about trying to park for the weekend. and the weekend is a heavy travel time. There are two other items I'd like to mention on here, they endorse, and one, and both have to do, well, one has to do with Border Trail, and that's in the North Main Street area to get across the tracks, either above or below it. And the other is to connect Gallup Park with the Arboretum using a tunnel under the tracks. Presently, these are breached now. People, I remember when I used to cut through the hole in the fence to get to the Arboretum from Gallup Park and carry my bike over the tracks. I don't do that anymore. I don't bike too much anymore. But this need has been there for a long time, and it's a safety issue. And also it's a convenience issue because, you know, the railroads have put up with holes in the fences and things like that for a while, but with increased train traffic and increased speeds, they're going to say, we're going to really enforce this, and people won't be able to get across there anymore. So these should have been done years ago, and I think they should be done now. Thank you very much. I'll be here if there are any questions.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to the capital improvements plan? Seeing no one, I will read the motion. Whereas section 1:185 of the Ann Arbor City Code requires that the City Planning Commission annually prepare a capital improvements program identifying public improvements that will be needed within the ensuing 6 years in the general order of priority. Whereas the fiscal year 2020 through 2025 capital improvements plan CIP has been drafted by city asset category teams and reviewed by the City Plan Commission. And whereas a duly noticed public hearing on the draft was held by the City Planning Commission on January 15th, 2019. Resolved that the City Planning Commission hereby approves the fiscal year 2020 through 2025 capital improvements plan as a supporting document for the city's master plan, and resolved that the City Planning Commission recommends that the City Council approve the fiscal year 2020 through 2025 capital improvements plan as the basis for the fiscal year 2020-2021 capital budget. Do you have a commissioner who will move this? Moved by Commissioner Weatherby, seconded by Commissioner Mills. We are in discussion. Commissioner Gibrandal.
I was just looking up the border-to-border Vandermeer-Barton connection, and I see it for 2021. Is that?
21, 22, so design.
Ms. Gosselin, if you can come up to the microphone.
Yes, it is slated for 21 design, 22 construction at present. And Mr. Deck is right, that is moved back. And just quick information for you on that. There are 2 or 3 things playing into that. One of them is this is really a county-led project at this point, because one of the pivotal financial pieces is the portion of county street millage that they set aside for these kind of connectors between communities. It's right at our edge. And they were having some concerns about the dollars because it had been a while. So they're just about complete with an updated cost estimate. But for one thing, we did not have that. I believe it's going to go up from the $4.5 million that is in here. And at the moment, we still have a funding gap. So with their $2 million, they indicate they believe there'll be private donations, but haven't given us a realistic number. The other thing, we think a TAP grant would be a likely player in this game. And as you're probably aware, the other tunnel that will go under the railroad, that's called the Allen Creek Tunnel opening. Hopefully we'll go to bid here in May, but we had an 18 TAP grant. The state asked us to push that into fiscal 19, which turned out to be a good thing because that's the right timing. So we would have had no opportunity to get the 19 TAP for this project. So it is number 2. We're pushing it as hard as we can, but we're still going to have some funding holes that could require general funds, and finance was pretty straightforward about don't ask for general funds in 2020 of any substantive nature. So it's as soon as we can move it forward is the position it's in here.
And have TAP grants pretty much stayed consistent over the last couple of years in terms of where, because that's a federal program that's administered by the state? Is that how
Correct.
that works? Yeah.
And yes and no, it is a competitive situation. The just shy of $1 million that we got on the Allen Creek berm is one of the largest ones we've ever gotten. And we're going to go back to the table and ask for the same probably on this one. So to me, one of the keys of keeping it moving is going to come down to the private donation angle and probably some general funds. But once we get that updated number, then we're trying to keep it on track to go into design in 2021. And bear in mind, that will start in July of 2020, because that's the beginning of the fiscal year for 21.
Okay.
Commissioner Briggs.
So I think it's no surprise that I like the border-to-border trails, but I have some questions about some other projects as well. It was helpful to understand more of the funding on that. So the Ann Arbor Railroad Quiet Zone, I was surprised to see so much allocated for that. I didn't realize we were that far along in the planning process for that.
Really, this was kind of a tough one to figure out what to do with in the CIP, because the, council did approve, of course, the initial study, and what this reflects is if you want to go forward, this is the kind of dollars that you're looking at. So this is one of the projects in the CIP that, as presently proposed, is completely general funded. So I do not know when council really looks at the kind of dollars, what value they will decide in terms of spending general funds. I can't speculate, but I felt like since the study was complete, it came from them, and this reflects what it would do. This will, the funding, of course, while you approve the plan, it's within council purview. They may have the same reaction that you did, but I don't know that.
Do all the planning commissioners know what quiet zone means? Cool.
And then, I guess I'll just highlight some of the projects that I would like to see funding for at some point. The Washington Bicycle Boulevard, and also Washington Street, in front of the YMCA, it's in such bad disrepair. And we've had the Washington Bicycle Boulevard in the plans, non-motorized plan for, I think at least 10 years now. The other piece that I was surprised not to see funding associated with was the William III State Protected Bike Lane. And so I was not sure if that was not moving forward, or if I was just not understanding the funding on that, or? Actually,
it's moving forward like lightning, because it's in prior years, which really means it's ongoing now. The funding, part of that is DDA. There's some city street funding in there, so the protected bike lane is actually part of a whole suite of projects that DDA is bidding. I think it may already be bid, so the intent is to do that this calendar year. It'll start in fiscal 19. So it's shown here, and everything else looks like zero, because in theory, it could be done by the end of June.
Okay, good. That's what I was confused about. So just back to the quiet zone, and this is just commentary for us. This is one of those ones that I thought we might actually be sort of interested in. Obviously, we've been recommending greater development, density of development, and obviously, on a personal note, I'm not particularly supportive of a quiet zone. However, on a broader note, I can understand how more development sort of suggests that more people might be near the tracks and there might be a preference for quiet zone. However, given the price tag on that and how much we're talking about and how many other projects in here are not funded, I could happily see those sort of general fund dollars going to doing the border-to-border trail or some of the other really important projects in here that have much longer been in our plan. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So I had a couple questions on ones that I either noticed or people brought to my attention. One was the $175,000 in Urban Park Plaza improvements in 2022. And just because that's been kind of a hot topic in the city recently, I was just wondering what that might be for.
You know, that is a project that's been in for a while for additional work at Liberty Park Plaza.
Okay.
And it keeps being pushed back because of, you know, wanting to know what owners around that might have in mind and not doing something that would be inconsistent. But they use the general tag of Urban Park Plaza, and at the time, there was a couple of other little tiny ones that kind of fell under that umbrella, so that was not envisioned, say, in conjunction with the vote of the people about the library lot area, because we did not have any direction with regard to that at the time this was put together. Could it be redirected to that? Maybe, but it was intended for Liberty Plaza.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then the other one was the sidewalk gap projects not funded until 2022. And does that mean that there won't be any sidewalk gaps?
No,
Filled,
that
or?
one is one of those kind of awkward things where we have it as sort of a placeholder. So we plan money, and then once we identify the projects for the year, we zero that out, but we keep some more pots further out. Some of the unknowns on that in the later years too are, you know, we're assuming the county street millage will be renewed, but we're not sure, and we have $500,000 a year from that we use for non-motorized, and sidewalk gaps have been one of those. So there definitely are, if you look through other specific sidewalk projects that are in here. For instance, in 2020, there's a gap over by Fuller Court that is consistently asked for by citizens, and we'll be partnering with the university on that. We have Jackson, to be kind of southerly side of Jackson, where that one's been requested for a long time, so that one's in the 2021. So if you look, there are specific ones, and that's a pot of money we really just haven't designated where it's not zero. So there will be work.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, as always, for being here. I'm working late. I noticed that in the near future, we have a line item for the farmer's market winterization improvements.
Yes.
That came in about twice over bid is what we were expecting a couple of
Yes.
years ago, and I see this new higher number included in the capital improvements plan. It was my understanding expectation we weren't going to move forward if bids remain that high, but it does look like we're putting aside money.
There is money put aside. Some of that is coming from like the market association itself, so it's not all city funds. And as of when this was put together, Colin Smith was saying, we're going to proceed, but we just had to book a lot more money for it than what we had the last time you saw it.
Will there be an impact to the general fund, and the market has its
No.
own fund, correct?
Right, the market has a fund, there was some stockpiled money, there's some Parks and Recreation money, because they manage that, the farmer's market. So no general funds are in that number.
Got it. And we would never stockpile money, we would just save it responsibly for the
That's
taxpayer.
right, that's a better way to put it.
Good.
Thank you.
I had a question about the Trader Joe's sanitary sewer repair. It's the only place where we see a private entity's name.
And it's only to identify to people where it is.
Okay.
And we kind of hesitated and thought, well, for us to know what we're talking about, but there is a piece running through the Trader Joe's off of Washtenaw that we've had breaks on, and there's a retaining wall involved, and we decided it's one of those we're probably going to have to quit patching and do something about, so it's strictly identifying the where.
Got it. And speaking of sanitary sewer, there are some hot spots throughout the city that see, leaks or prominent leaks, particularly around here on River, around the U of M Hospital and Arboretum, the northwest side, and then the latest being Burr Park down on the southeast side of town. Could you point to where some of those longer-term maintenance
Sure.
actions appear?
Starting with the ARB, it would not jump out at you, that's what it's talking about, but there's a project called the South Side Interceptor Rehabilitation.
Okay.
And that's what we call the big pipe going through the ARB that we've had a lot of trouble with. We've already gotten it lined and fixed up through the siphon that goes under the river, but we have another significant piece that we are continuing on. So you can see we've already spent over $12 million on it leading up to this point, including work we're doing this spring. 2020 will be a little bit of a light year because it'll be designed for the next phase. So we have quite a bit left to do, and a big chunk of it is in the ARB. And yes, we have had enough problems there that one's always been high priority.
Great.
There are also projects in sanitary that came out of the wet weather mitigation study. And some of those are a little longer term because they're pretty expensive, but, you know, a few lines down, and bear in mind, new ones are in gray, like in the Darlington subdivision area, we need to do about $2.4 million worth of work. One of them going relatively quickly also, the high-level trunk line sanitary sewer is more on the north and west end of town. That's one that's had kind of some consistent issues. Here on West Park area, improvements are looking at 21, 22, very significant, $5 million. So one other thing you may see under sanitary in parentheses, it says DOM, that's developer offset mitigation. So was it maybe a year ago now, council authorized developers who would otherwise have to like do footing drain disconnects, do different things to cut down sewer capacity, find the locations, do it themselves. They offered a payment in lieu option. And that's really wonderful in that it's giving us money to fund some of these big projects that will cut down on stormwater infiltration into our sewers, which ultimately lead to backups. So quite a bit is trying to meet the goal that you're asking about.
Okay. And specifically with respect to the area around Burr Park, it led to sewage leaking into the river shed. And
You know, I'm not familiar with exactly what pipes run through there because it wouldn't necessarily be named like
Got it, okay.
Burr Park area, so I can't tell you
I can follow up.
specific, yeah.
Thanks. And then last question, with respect to the flood grant matching, it seems to be an ongoing
Yes.
expense. Are those identified grants that we intend to apply for, or are we just setting aside money with the assumption grants may come along?
Setting it aside
Cool.
as matches whenever we get an opportunity in particular to perhaps purchase a house, take it down, get it out of the floodplain like we did on Kingsley. We tried recently near the old 721 North Main for a place there, but the deal kind of fell apart over appraisal. But yes, that is there, so Jerry Hancock, our floodplain manager, keeps an eagle eye out for opportunities to get things out of the floodway, and that's the match.
Oh, so those are specifically intended to bring properties out of the floodplain, or floodway?
With that dollar amount, for the most part, yes. So when we had a giant project like that Allen Creek berm opening project, where we got a very large FEMA grant, but we needed a lot of money, that just was straight up stormwater funds that we designated to that project. So this is for the smaller opportunities. And it could be something else storm-related, but that's what it traditionally has been.
Okay, understood. And then I'm really glad to see so much focus and prioritization of street lighting, particularly along Packard, very dark corridor. So I'm excited to see some of these pedestrian and cyclist safety dollars turning into real infrastructure. So very excited.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Thank you. So at the Transportation Commission, we did have the pleasure of hearing a bit more about the airport and things, but I had just was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the plan to expand the runway, which was, I think, the biggest line item coming up in the next couple of years. And I'm also curious, like, where the money's coming from for that. Is that all on us, or is that coming from other sources?
airport is kind of a unique group in that the bulk of the money comes from the outside, from FAA grants. There is a local match, but it is not general fund. It's from user fees and earnings from the airport, hangar fees, things like that. So it's revenue-driven. The runway extension project has been in here for quite some time. There have been some challenges to the project from the township and nearby residents, and the environmental went on for some time. So Matt Kulhenek, who's Facilities and Fleet Director for the city, said 2021 is the realistic timing of it. And right now, FAA is not releasing monies for any of these other projects until they decide to move forward, fund, not fund, whatever the runway extension. So, I mean, it looks to be on target, but it's had a number of delays.
Hey, thank you. I also had I guess, maybe you can just confirm my assumption here with the fire station. I remember last year, I think MLive reported on a plan Chief Collins wrote about the fire stations, and it looks like we added a renovation to Station 1. And which I'm assuming means there's no plan within the fire department to do a much more ambitious sort of reconfiguration of where stations are and how big they are.
That's a good question, because there really is kind of a fundamental change in thinking on the fire stations from the last one to this. So Fire Station 1 remodel would just be the third floor of the main station across the street. And right now, Station 2, I believe, is the one that's not really used as a functional fire station, but there's still Fire Prevention Bureau, I guess, is still in there. We also have been wanting a true emergency operations center for a long time, and that in the previous plan was tagged to a new station. So some of the rethinking is, let's remodel third floor and see if we can get emergency operations, fire prevention, and some other basic facility needs they have in Station 1 as job one. And then start into, now they're looking at for Stations 3 and 4, instead of going and finding a new piece of property, rebuilding in place. So that is a little change in thinking, but still saying that those stations are nearing the end of their life and they want to go for replacement, but now in place.
I could just add quickly, so Chief Kennedy has put out the fire station master plan, and an important piece about Station 1 is Metro Dispatch will be leaving under the sheriff's office, which opens up a lot of square footage. Right. And utilizing that public asset in a better way is going to be, very relevant very soon as Sheriff Clayton decides that it's time to move. So.
Yeah, and I remember from the report that the previous chief's opinion was Station 1 was far too large. So it's good at least seeing we're putting it to other uses. Whether or not the current chief has the same opinion or not, I don't know. But I was just curious about where the plans had gone there. So thank you for clarifying that. And I'll also just say I had the same reaction to seeing the quiet zone funding in the plan. So I'll be following that as it goes, I think, forward to council, where I'm sure it will be a topic of discussion.
Commissioner Mills.
Thanks. When you were talking earlier about the B2B, you were really reliant a lot on county funding. I think that was really the Bandamer Park area. Yes. So the Fuller and Maiden Lane, not the underpass, but the other part, seems to rank pretty high, but is effectively off the charts. And there's other things that rank lower that are similar price tags. So can you talk a little bit about the funding for that particular, because we know there's going to be a whole lot of development going on in that area, and so there's potentially a whole lot more users for the system entering right there, and that's already an unsafe kind of area.
Yes, so that one is another reflecting a change that didn't even so much have to do with money, although money is still an issue, because that at least in part will take probably general fund, TAP fund kind of combination. But at some point, council had passed a resolution saying, when you go forward with whatever you do at the road part of this, Fuller Maiden Lane East Medical Center intersection, make sure all these non-motorized projects are done, that it's a suite of projects. Well, the seeking of funds and different things going on have been quite some time in the making, and the latest thinking had been a roundabout up until this point. But as we move forward actively in the design this past year, there have been so much change and reevaluation of the traffic that our engineers with outside consultants concluded the roundabout is not going to work as the sole solution there. So at this point, we're back to a major rethinking of the broader fuller corridor in that area and not just focusing on the intersection. So we hope as that progresses forward, we can move it back this way in time. But direction from above was, there's so many unknowns on this right now that just park it out there, and as the design progressive and we see what we need, like one really significant financial change is it looks like we'll probably have to actually tear those bridges out and rebuild them to get additional lanes. That's a huge ticket one that'll take longer to find financing. So the problem with the associated non-motorized is if you try to forge ahead with those and then you change the whole road configuration, you're going to end up redoing where things go under, go over. So we kind of had to put those on halt until we get the solution that works best for traffic and non-motorized, of course. Also, we could end up looking at pedestrian overpasses for all we know, because I think the changes are going to be pretty significant. So that's why those were pushed back, unfortunately.
Got it. I was going to say, like, I'm of two minds, right? Like, it's not in a good situation now, but wise use of funds would suggest, like, you don't want to put it in and then rip it out. Can you tell us how much, the other thing going on in that area, or the unknown, is the other project that was talked about, which is the train station, and how much that is changing the thinking about the road system there, or is that not necessarily?
It's really not pivotal. It's more, the university always had some reservations about the roundabout concept with moving ambulances and things like that. And, they gave us updated numbers. Of course, as you all know, there's a lot of development in that general part of town. And just so in composite, we're looking at, it may end up being another roundabout back at Glen and something here, maybe something even past it. The potential to have to take out the bridges and get more lanes to move from those legs. Like say, then we'd have to go after bridge funding. Besides, for the roundabout, we've been using congestion mitigation funds. We had some, we had to turn them back in because it wasn't going to do the job. So it's probably the most complex engineering project, I would say, that's in this plan at this point. There may be some more dollar ones like the train station, but trying to figure out the best way for long-term for that corridor to work is turning out to be quite a challenge right now. So you'll be hearing more by next fall as this continued design effort. We may modify it and move it back, but right now it's like we just don't know, so it's not fair to make them look like they're in that term when we don't know if we can fund the bigger thing.
And so design continues on
Yes,
the road side. So
exactly.
Okay.
So we did not, if you went to the street thing, you'll say there's money programmed every year for the foreseeable future to keep working that effort.
Very good. I also really want to thank you for again, all of the work that goes into this and the expertise that you bring to this. I think it's really professional, and I appreciate the sharing kind of the formula behind this. I mean, Ann Arbor has a really, it's a really formulaic process, so we're not just, and bringing that to us and letting us see how that works. Good. I think I really appreciate that. I like that this year the rankings associated with things from general funds and being able to see, we typically prioritize things by asset class, but now there's a meta effectively ranking, and I think that that's helpful. A question that I had now that I kind of see the formula, the first thing that I thought when I saw it was like, oh man, in terms of a percentage, like we talk a lot about sustainability, but like sustainability makes up like 10 to 15% of the rank for any of these things. But then there's another line on master plan, like the fitting with master plan. The sustainability framework is part of our master plan. So is that indeed like, and if something counts, if it meets some of the sustainability things, is it also then considered as meeting some of the master plan? So do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, it can. Master plan, for the most part, the intent of that is like, Parks has what they call their pros plan.
Yeah.
And it's like, if that project is identified in there, then it's already been vetted by a commission, by a large group, and so it's going to earn master plan points. Whether it's advancing the sustainability goals, which, are those 16, there can be some overlap, but it's not as much as you would think. Part of the other challenge, and I think I mentioned at the work session that I'm going to have some more discussions with Missy Stultz, the new sustainability and climate change and all those things that are in hers, to maybe even winnow the sustainability framework goals down further in terms of CIP ranking, because there are some in there, like local food, that no CIP project is going to ever advance. So, sustainability framework are overall city goals. They weren't written specifically for capital projects. They could be for programs. They can be for other things, and try and extract those at a capital project. But right now, it's like, how many of them do they advance? And the thing we added this year of making people record which ones, I think is going to be pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So if you say this has energy, Missy's going to be saying, hey, designer on this project, train station, fire station, whatever it is, if you said you could advance our energy goal, what are you specifically doing? So I think it would be a real good kind of oversight thing. But in and of itself, you're right, it doesn't rank highly by itself, and I think it's because there's not always that clear of capital ties when you look at the total framework, but the ideas trickle through to the other criteria besides.
Got it. And just for the people at home who may care, the sustainability framework also includes affordability, diverse housing stock, and active living and learning. So it's not just thinking specifically about climate or.
Exactly. So that climate is up under the first group that include energy and climate change and things like that. And then there's a more social, for lack of better terms. So there are 4 key groups.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Just a fun item on that note is there's musings that the remodel or the reconstruction of Fire Station 4 would be carbon net neutral. It would actually be the second carbon net neutral fire station in the country, the first this side of the Mississippi.
Commissioner
And it's
Trudeau.
in Ward 3, the best ward in there.
I also just wanted to say thank you for breaking out the categories with transportation. I think that was something that came first from Transportation Commission.
Correct, and thank you.
And I was happy to see the Washtenaw Bicycle Boulevard, and I think the low-stress bicycle network signage were things that were flagged from the Transportation Commission.
Correct.
Nice to see the funding come sooner, but at least they're on there.
Commissioner Briggs.
Just a tidbit of information more about the border trail at Fuller Main Lane and connecting under Fuller, since with the new information of the roundabouts not working. I just encourage everybody to go and actually check those out, because what's not apparent from sidewalk, like when you're in that area, is actually that we have when those bridges were built, the concrete pads are underneath those bridges. And so actually, I wonder about the $2 million price tag for the Fuller Main Lane. I'm sure that could be done in a much, I'm sure it could cost that much. I just wonder if there is a short-term fix that might, if we're talking about rebuilding bridges and things like that, we know that we're a long ways away from fixing this, this area. And so I'm just wondering if there are short-term solutions that might help address some of the transportation problems we might be able to see and some of those connectivity issues. But it is sort of fun in my world of fun, to go and check out those underpasses, because right now, especially at the main lane, sadly it's being used for homeless housing right now. So.
So it looks like we're close to vote. I just have one request. Ms. Gosselin, you do a great job, and seeing this list every year is overwhelming because we realize how much work is, or we'd like to undertake, and I also see the bottom line number at the very end of it. But what I also realize is that we've been busy the last year completing projects that were on last year's list and the year before.
Right.
And it'd be really great if we could get an updated sort of list of what's happened, just so that we don't look at this daunting list and say, oh no, we have so much to do. But actually, oh, it's here.
Yeah, you do have a completed list,
It's
and
in
it's
such
been.
small print
I
compared to everything
know.
else.
There
has
was
to
a
be
lot,
tiny,
and I
tiny
thought,
print.
it's getting it's the systems planning
Okay.
person in me who makes
Now that I
paper
get to the
waste.
end of it, I do need a magnifying glass. We should make it very bold and very large font,
Yeah,
so
it's
that
like, look what we got
know all
done.
that's been taken care of. But
Yeah.
it is a lot. But when we look at this and we look at the dollar figures, you think to yourself, this is never going to get done. But it obviously we know otherwise because we see all the construction that happens around the city. So.
Yeah, the completion rate just keeps going up, up, up. And, the biggest challenge is when the funding, for whatever reason, goes away on something big. It makes the statistics look a little funny, but the sheer number, that are proposed and completed is very high these days. So a lot of
Thank you.
hardworking staff and consultants and contractors. And actually, one of the challenges we're facing right now in completion is that contractors are so busy that we're not getting, 6 people bidding on a project. Maybe we get 2, and it's like, do we want to go forward with these numbers? So contractor capacity is getting to be an even bigger challenge. The staff are working at capacity, but we can always hire a consultant to supplement, but contractors bid what they bid.
Right.
So
Well, thank you. Is there any further discussion on this? All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's approved. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, moving on to audience participation. This is the time for audience to address the Planning Commission. You have up to 3 minutes to speak. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission?
Can I say a couple more things, or?
Please.
Just appreciate the questions on the border projects. One thing is that, as planners know, you can rarely build your way out of congestion by adding lanes. It just tends to move congestion somewhere else. And so the prospect of adding lanes to what's already a 5-lane by 5-lane intersection at Fuller and Main Lane doesn't seem very promising to me. We might ask ourselves why there's congestion there to begin with, and maybe it's because people are terrified of walking or biking in that area. So some of these projects would help reduce that congestion load in that area. So, as I think Eric was suggesting, a number of these things could be built without impact on the future alignment of whatever changes are made in that intersection, because the pads exist under those bridges that were built 30 years ago for that purpose, for the trail connectivity there. It just hasn't been built, but the actual trails would often be far enough away from the intersection that they would not interfere with future construction. And if some part of them had to be changed later, that could be done, but a lot could be done now to help solve an existing problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to just take a minute and explain my company's position for the location at 1251 Main Street. We have a 25-year lease for 1251, and we are really excited to have a patient center there. And if the site improvements are holding back the approval, with the site improvements, would 1251 be reconsidered? Because being that we have a lease there, I don't see any help towards the traffic congestion with any other business that we could open there that wouldn't take the SEU into consideration for the entrance. I'd even consider naming the place Right In, Right Out. We just really want to open our patient center there. It's a positive push, and it's really going to turn that location into something special. And something positive, and something that looks appealing. And we're just looking for some feedback on what can we do to get that reconsidered. We're one vote off.
So I'd recommend discussing it with city planning staff in regards to that. So maybe you can catch up with Mr. Leonard after the meeting so you can have a conversation of how to move forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission? Seeing no one, we will move to commission proposed business. Is there any commissioners? All right, moving on to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Trudeau. We are adjourned. Thank you.